Well, I want to go back to the Elizabethan worldview and give you part two. In the first segment, I talked about providentialism and the macrocosm, the microcosm, and the correspondences between them. This time, I want to tell you how things make sense because when you were an Elizabethan, you always knew where you belonged, you always had someone to be accountable to, and you always had someone looking after you. So the two words for today, one word and one term, I should say, hierarchies, and then the phrase, the term, the great chain of being. And we'll start with hierarchies because you all know what a hierarchy is. It's your chain of command. It's what defines the status level of different individuals in a group. The original word that hierarchy comes from meant the status level of angels. So there were 9 different choirs of angels in the hierarchy, and the one at the very bottom are the angels, and then above them the principalities, and above them the archangels. Well, I won't give you all 9 levels. I'll just tell you that the cherubim are the next to the top, and all the way at the top are the seraphim, and you can Google the rest of them if you like. But now we apply this word hierarchies to all sorts of scales of value. And in Shakespeare's time, the political hierarchy had maybe an emperor at the top, and then the kings that were his vassals, or maybe the king was at the top. In England, the king was the highest political power, and then the aristocrats were below him, and at the very bottom would be serfs, peasants, slaves. In England, it wasn't legal to actually own a slave outright, but if you were a peasant or if you were an apprentice, you had a master. Everybody had a master except the king. And if you were higher up on the hierarchy, your master might be called your lord, but the king is at the top. Now, the king has not only authority but obligation. He has to take care of everyone who's farther down on the hierarchy. In the family, the hierarchy has the father at the top, the father who's also, we hope, a husband. And then after him, immediately below him, is his wife, the mother, and then below her are the children and the servants. And depending on the ages and the job description, some of the servants might actually have some authority over some of the children, but the mother and the wife has authority over the servants, just as the father, the husband, has authority over everyone in the family. Mammals have their own hierarchy, with the lion as the king of the beasts. The eagle was the best bird. Gold was the best mineral. So everything has its own place within its own hierarchy. And you always knew exactly where you stood and who you belonged to and who was responsible for looking out for you. Now, the great chain of being is related but a separate kind of entity. The great chain starts in heaven with God at the top of the great chain of being. And then underneath him are the angels. And the angels, as you just heard, have their own hierarchy. And just because you're an angel, that doesn't make you great. It makes you an angel within this particular chain of command. So underneath God are the angels, and then human beings, and then the lower animals, and underneath the sentient animals are the plants, the vegetable kingdom. And then, of course, underneath those would be non-living parts of the universe. So the thing about the great chain of being is that it's the basis for all the hierarchies. So rebellion against my husband would be like rebellion against God, because I stand in the great chain of being at a point analogous to my husband, the way the way human beings stand in relation to God. So it isn't just a political matter if you are in rebellion against King George III, as the colonists were in 1776. In the eyes of the Church of England, this was also a heinous sin against God Almighty, because in the great chain of being, God had ordained all these other hierarchies. So as you look at the plays of Shakespeare, you can see exactly how the characters are supposed to relate to each other, and why it's so disturbing, or maybe in a comedy, why it's so funny when a woman is rebellious against her husband, or a son is rebellious against his older brother. In the tragedies, of course, these things spell doom and disaster, and you should be aware the first time you see the hint of insurrection or insubordination that the great chain is being challenged.